AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Joining me today, as she does every Wednesday, is the one and only Sparkles. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Always happy.
Always busy. Great show lined up today, too. We got John Malcolm, the director of the Meese Center for Legal and Justice Studies at Heritage, and Jerome Hudson from Breitbart. We're going to, this is all about the Kavanaugh hearings and the idiocy that was displayed yesterday. The sound bites alone are worth the podcast listen, just to hear things that were said on behalf of, I'm going to use air quotes, Democratic politicians last night and yesterday. This was another, I can't believe he won the election and I'm still mad at everything. I'm going to roll around on the grocery store cereal aisle because I didn't get my way kind of a thing. There's no doubt in my mind that yesterday was a referendum again on the losing of an election. There is so many things to talk about, from the apparent white supremacist sitting behind the judge to the handshake during a break that never was, from a victim's father, Parkland shooting victim's father, who tweeted out his disgust of the judge and said he was going to make sure that the judge did not get appointed, and then tried to play it off as if the judge was rude to him, and I actually got into a little Twitter discussion with the gentleman last night. Anyway, let's start off with the soundbite, shall we? Kicking it off is NBC Nightly News. Listen to the news anchors on the left. Listen to them defend what the things that are said and done by these Democrats. First off, let's go to NBC Nightly News.
No delaying the drama today, as Democrats demanded one just seconds into the hearing.
We cannot possibly move forward, Mr. Chairman.
I extend a very warm welcome.
We have not been given an opportunity.
And we believe this hearing should be postponed.
Mr.
Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Protests erupting. 70 people ultimately arrested. In the audience, the father of a Parkland school shooting victim who says Brett Kavanaugh brushed him off when he introduced himself. The White House says the judge, escorted by security, didn't know who he was. Kavanaugh's opponents plan to pepper him about gun rights and abortion rights rulings and where he stands on investigating a sitting president. Democrats furious the White House has not released more documents about Kavanaugh's work under former President George W. Bush.
What are we trying to hide? Why are we rushing?
Republicans deriding it all as political posturing.
Still disappointed that it's not President Hillary Clinton making this appointment.
Republicans will defend Donald Trump's pick, who could reshape the Supreme Court for a generation.
Judge Kavanaugh doesn't hate women and children. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't lust after dirty water and stinky air.
If Republicans stick together, by the end of the month, Judge Kavanaugh could end up a justice.
I'm not a pro-prosecution or pro-defense judge. I am a pro-law judge.
I continue to chuckle. He's getting confirmed. There's nothing they can do about it. It's happening. They know that. They've admitted it. So this is all about running for president in 2020 is what it was, with Booker and Kamala Harris and Senator Sass, who's been a very anti-Trump guy, was one of the only level-headed people in the room talking about. You heard Senator Cruz say the same thing. You cannot debate the man's qualifications, which is the only thing that should matter. But what the more important thing for me is that I think our kids, hopefully, that are watching, and the generation, we need to understand what the Supreme Court actually is supposed to be. It is not a political branch of the government.
Right.
It is supposed to be an independent body. And the fact of the matter is, we'll get to this, but there are litmus tests the Democrats have always run for their judges, and now that this judge aces their litmus test, they don't even refer to them. But then, as she is wont to do, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who, God bless her and God love her, was on Fox and Friends, and I want you to listen to her talk about the lunacy that we had to listen to and watch yesterday. It seemed like every minute. Listen up.
Look, I thought it was an embarrassment for the Democrat Party, but frankly, not surprising at all. Unfortunately, we know they've been trying to use these ridiculous delay tactics. They've been opposing Kavanaugh before he was even nominated. They were speaking out, saying they wouldn't support President Trump's pick for the Supreme Court. And what we saw yesterday was really an embarrassment by the Democrats. But frankly, I also think it's great news for Republicans, because if this is what we're up against in 2018, and particularly the auditions that we saw for the 2020 presidential race that took place yesterday, I think we're in great shape, and we're going to look really good in both 2018 and 2020.
Well, Sarah, you work in the White House. There are a bunch of documents that the Democrats say they need in addition to the 500,000 they've already got. They're from the Bush White House when he was a staff secretary and he shuffled the papers across the president's desk. Yesterday it was very clear by Mr. Grassley that those are privileged and those should not be seen. Can you make that argument? Can you explain that for us, why those should remain privileged or executive privilege or whatever it is?
Look, the big point here is that, once again, Democrats opposed Kavanaugh before they even knew who he was. This isn't about documents. It's about ridiculous political ploys that the Democrats are trying to play. Kavanaugh and his team and our team here at the White House have turned over hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. There's also tons of public opinion and record that have been out on Kavanaugh. If Democrats can't figure out whether they're a yes or no based off of all of that, frankly, they shouldn't be in the Senate. I don't think that it's that hard to ask the questions that they have of Kavanaugh. Stop grandstanding. Start asking questions that you have to this individual and see if you think he's qualified, and then make a decision. It is absolutely ridiculous, the games that they're playing, and let's let the process play out. Let Kavanaugh answer these questions. If you're concerned that you don't think he's good enough, then put those questions to the test and put that on full display, which we hope we'll see today. And I guarantee you that Kavanaugh is going to deliver on every single one of those things, because he's unquestionably qualified. We've seen people from the left and the right that are the greatest judicial minds come out in support of Kavanaugh, and we fully expect the Senate to move through, quit playing games, and confirm him.
We talked about this last week. People are going to get sick and tired of the bashing. And the people who are, just right down the line left, they're going to think everything they do is great. But everybody in the middle is going to get tired of it. And I think that that's what's going to start to happen.
It's already started.
Yeah, that's why they think that they're going to have this big up and coming of they're going to win elections in November, and it's not true. They're
just going to,
they're going to get. People are sick of it.
It's what Sarah said. You can't fool us. They tried to do it in 2016. They didn't do it. But the moderates. This puts us in such a good position because nobody can agree with what these people are doing unless you are a socialist, anti-American, flag-hating person. I mean,
it really sounds like it just comes down to if you're Democrat in this mindset. No, of course, not all Democrats are like this, but if you're a Democrat, you're not wavering. It's like you can't go either way.
Remember what they told us during the election, that we were, as conservatives, we were picking the party over the country, or the party over the people. And it's exactly what they're doing. This is a Democratic. They talked. They had a phone call. They had a conference call the night before in which they planned to do all this. They were called on it, and they said, yeah, we had the phone call. But again, he's getting sworn in. He's going to be the next Supreme Court justice. And not to mention, my Lord, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg finally
says enough,
takes her dirt nap, he is going to reappoint another one, and they're going to go full crazy. But this is why you voted for Donald Trump.
It's really amazing because they don't have any kind of weapon to
It was embarrassing, though, to see what they did.
It was uncomfortable to listen to.
If Booker and Kamala Harris are candidates, God bless them, because I'm excited for 2020. And I said this yesterday, can you imagine working your whole life for this day and to have your family there and have to walk your daughters out because of what's happening. It was pathetic. And so anyway, Senator Cruz was on Fox News and made very clear how this is all going to play out, and he's usually been spot on. Listen up.
I thought it was striking in the entire day. I didn't hear a single Democrat raise even one concern about Judge Kavanaugh's qualifications to be a Supreme Court justice.
Well, do you think maybe that will come tomorrow?
I don't really. I mean, I don't think you can make a credible case that he isn't qualified. He's got impeccable academic credentials. He clerked on the U.S. Supreme Court. He's been an appellate judge on the D.C. Circuit, often referred to as the second highest court in the land, for over a decade. He's got over 300 published opinions. And so, by any measure, he's one of the most respected federal judges in the country. Even the ABA, which tends to be hard left-wing,
not a right-wing organization,
concluded that he was well qualified, because that's objectively true. What I thought was interesting, though, is there was very little from the Democrats even criticizing Judge Kavanaugh's opinions. Over 300 opinions. They've got over 10,000 pages of judicial opinions he's written. There's a little bit of criticism, but not much. And I think that speaks volumes about, much like Neil Gorsuch, where they kept trying to find a punch they could land on him. I didn't see any Democrats landing a punch on Judge Kavanaugh. What they did today is rail on about procedure and then just attack President Trump. Well, President Trump hasn't been nominated to the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh has. Yeah. And at least so far, the Democrats have not had, I think, any attacks that have stuck.
Well, they won't. I'm going to say this, and we're going to talk about this later as well. What he was referring to, the American Bar Association, is wicked. It's right. All the lawyers in the country. Starting, well, a long time ago, but then becoming very apparent during Judge Sotomayor's confirmation, the left pointed to the fact, and she's got commentary and potential past. You could think there's a hint of prejudice in her. Well, not even a hint, but she is a very prejudiced person. But the American Bar Association was the litmus test for the Democrats. They said, hey, listen, if the American Bar Association says she's okay, then who are we to argue? And the other one was the body of work. Judge Kavanaugh was given the American Bar Association's highest commendation, and his body of work is more than the previous 5 confirmed judges combined. And they've got everything on his 307 decisions, but those things went out the window. And like Senator Cruz said, this is not about his qualifications, because you can't question them, which should be the only thing that matters. But it doesn't matter at all, because this is a political football that's being thrown around. And as if he isn't already turned himself into a media nobody, CNN's Don Lemon came out and spoke to Cory Booker, who apparently is running for the presidency in 2020 because he began his campaign yesterday at the hearing. Listen to Cory Booker lie about Justice Kavanaugh and how this came to be.
Do you think Kavanaugh was chosen solely because of his views on presidential powers?
Well, I think that and I've already pulled a lot of the law on recusal, and one big part of that is this idea of an appearance of impropriety. If a judge believes that by ruling on a case, by being involved in a case, he will undermine people's, legitimately, the reasonable person, actually, it says, faith in the system. And I think that anybody who is looking at this, to see Donald Trump picking somebody who wasn't on his original outsourced list, as I said, but picking the one guy from his later list that was added to the list after the Mueller investigation started, in which Donald Trump is under criminal investigation right now, and is an unindicted co-conspirator, according to his personal attorney. That for him to pick the one person who has said, hey, I don't think a president could be prosecuted, I think a president can end an investigation, he's spoken significantly about this. So I think it raises enough suspicions that Judge Kavanaugh should commit to recusing himself on this, because no one's above the law, not even the President of the United States. Okay. No one is above the law, and fundamental to our legal system is you should not be able to pick the judge that's going to rule on your case.
And so that's Cory Booker in a nutshell. He is clearly running for president in 2020, but also listen, he's going to be opposed by he's going to be up against the next soundbite on MSNBC. I can only hope she does run. Kamala Harris, who I think was the first person to jump in about 15 seconds into the hearing yesterday, which was supposed to be time for the chair's opening statements. Listen to Kamala Harris.
Well, what's unprecedented is that there's a whole trove of documents that apply to this nominee's professional life that we have no access to, and we've been denied access. This is unprecedented. Elena Kagan, for example, she worked for an administration, and the documents that were associated with her work in that administration were given to the committee. so that they could fully vet who she was. Executive privilege was not applied to the documents that were associated with her work with that White House. But that's not the case here. This is unprecedented.
There is a sense, I think, of folks, and you could hear it in sort of Republicans saying today, look, we won the election, you lost, we get to do whatever we want to do. What's your response to that?
Barack Obama won the election and he nominated Merrick Garland. And they obstructed the ability of that elected president to nominate and have a meaningful hearing on his nominee to the United States Supreme Court. So it lacks merit, that allegation. It is actually, it's an empty point, at least as applied to the Republicans, who were presented with a nominee by a president of the United States, and that nominee was Merrick Garland, and they wouldn't even give him an interview and one-on-one meetings, much less a hearing.
Why was that? Because before that, Joe Biden and Democrats and Harry Reid said you cannot and we will not confirm justices in a presidential election year. So they elected Merrick Garland during a presidential election year and were denied, and then said, well, wait a minute, that's not right. You can't do that. It's the same reason Brett Kavanaugh's getting confirmed, because Harry Reid brought in the nuclear option, and now instead of 60 votes, it's a simple majority. And yes, we won, you lost, sit down, shut up.
Well, it's kind of funny to hear him say that.
Yeah, because they did that they tried to do that for 8 years. They had 2 years in the initial Obama administration when the Democrats ran the Senate and had majority, and they didn't do squat, because they're not about governing. They're about an ideological agenda that doesn't align with who and what we are. We're going to take a short break. On the flip side, John Malcolm, from the director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies, is going to talk about the most qualified candidate for the Supreme Court in our lifetime, short of Neil Gorsuch. Back in just a minute.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Censorship is a key issue here, particularly for people on the right. Do you think it was addressed adequately?
Definitely not. It was useful to name check Diamond and Silk. It was useful to check even politicians who had campaign ads that were shut down. But in every case, Zuckerberg was allowed to essentially dismiss the case and move on.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining us now is the director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage, John Malcolm. Good morning, John. How are you?
Doing great. Good to be with you.
All right. This is, in baseball parlance, this is right in your wheelhouse. I know you. I'm assuming you watched with your mouth agape yesterday, much like I did. I was surprised at the idiocy. I didn't expect it to get that extreme. I didn't expect Justice Kavanaugh's kids to have to be walked out of the hearings because of the contentious, the stunts, the comments, certainly not becoming of the people that were in that room, are supposed to be in that room. You have probably one of the most qualified judges in the history of the Supreme Court, at least in our lifetimes. And I don't know if you heard the soundbite, but Senator Cruz made it very clear. You heard nothing about his qualifications or his rulings, because there is no question that you can't question him. But what I saw yesterday was a rehashing of the fact that they lost the 2016 election in a process that's supposed to be not even remotely related to politics.
Yeah, no, look, that is certainly all true. This is a very distinguished judge who served with on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the second most powerful court in the land for the last dozen years. He's written 307 opinions and joined 391 others, and the Democrats don't want to spend any time talking about those cases. He is highly regarded by judges who are appointed by Democrats and Republicans, which is why he has received the highest rating from the American Bar Association, which is hardly a bastion of conservative legal thought. He's already begun today. There have been several protesters thrown out of the room, but he's begun answering questions and talking about his independence. He reminded the senators, for instance, that he is the person that ruled in favor of a defendant named Hamdan, who was an associate of Osama bin Laden's, and obviously he worked for President Bush at the time of 9/11 and was involved in setting up the tribunals that tried Hamdan. Yet as a judge, he had the independence to say that they had charged Tom Don with a crime that was not, in fact, a crime at the time that this was committed. So it violated the ex post facto clause. He's a very intelligent, thorough, thoughtful, and independent judge, and he will be confirmed and will be an outstanding Supreme Court justice.
Well, the term intelligent, I feel almost embarrassed to call them intelligent because I see gentlemen like him and Judge Gorsuch and Justice Scalia and Justice Kennedy. They are so smart. They are so on the money. And I don't believe, I don't believe, and I think I'm going to ask you a question. I don't believe there will be a lot of dialogue around his judicial history because every time he gets to sit up there in front of those people and talk about his judicial past, he confirms exactly why he was nominated. And this is the left's, the left doesn't want to hear any of this. Because let me ask you this. Let's be very clear. This entire fight is a grandstand for the 2020 elections. But the only thing the left cares about as it relates to Justice Kavanaugh is the right to have abortion on demand. And they're afraid that that's going to be something taken away, even though that's not what's going to happen or how it even works.
Well, you've actually said quite a bit in there, so let me try to unpack that a little bit. There's certainly at least a couple of senators who are on the Senate Judiciary Committee who have made clear their intentions to run for president in 2020, and so they are going to be trying to out-rhetoric each other. I think it's going to be hard to top Cory Booker, who said that anybody who votes for Judge Kavanaugh is complicit in evil, but let's see what Kamala Harris does. And I also think that it has a lot to do with the elections in 2018. So the midterms are coming up. The Democrats have tried mightily to delay these proceedings until after the midterm. They are not going to succeed in doing this, so they are largely playing to their base. And you mentioned Roe versus Wade, and I'll say a couple of things about that. But as a general matter, I mean, all of the senators will say that they want a judge who is going to be fair and independent, but the Democrats, in the meantime, are going to try to get Judge Kavanaugh to commit to overturning the precedents that they don't like and to upholding the precedents that they like. Now, with respect to Roe versus Wade, this has been part of the Democrats' playbook practically since the time Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973, ever since going back to the confirmation hearings for Sandra Day O'Connor in 1981. Every time there is a nominee made by a Republican, they are out there predicting the imminent demise of Roe versus Wade. So far as I can tell, there is only one justice on the Supreme Court at the moment, Clarence Thomas, who has called for Roe to be revisited and overturned. I don't sense any great hunger on behalf of the other justices to take up that issue. I predict what will happen is that there will continue to be a steady diet of abortion cases involving regulations that either expand or retract abortion rights, but that I seriously doubt that the court is going to take on a full frontal assault on Roe versus Wade any time in the foreseeable future.
I would expect that we would see, if we ever see Roe v. Wade in front of the Supreme Court again, and I'm very much pro-life, but I would expect that the court, the most the court would do or could do, would hand the states back the rights to make those determinations. That would be, I think, the only that would be the win in a current judicial system for somebody like me. But I certainly don't expect to see. You know, my biggest concern has been the left's recent assault, I guess you could call it, on the Second Amendment and the citizens' right to bear arms, and the left's desire to repeal as much of that or get as many caveats and amendments to that as they possibly can. But
it sounds like we need a judge in there.
Go ahead.
No, I said it sounds like we need somebody in the hearings that can say, sit down, be quiet, a judge in there.
Well, actually, John Cornyn, who is a former Texas Supreme Court justice, yesterday had a cute line. One of the senators, I think it was Sheldon Whitehouse, said, well, you know, we haven't gotten all of these documents, and if we were in a court, there's no question that a judge would continue this trial so that we wouldn't have this hearing today. And Judge Cornyn said, looking at the way you all are acting, I can tell you right now as a former judge that if this were actually a courtroom, all of you would be held in contempt. And that is certainly true.
Great.
That was wonderful.
That's great.
That was wonderful.
But I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No. I was going to say.
Well, you were asking about Heller. That is one of those instances in which the Democrats are, to try to pound him. I mean, Justice Scalia in the Heller decision in 2008 recognized that this is an individual right to keep and bear arms, and the left has been apoplectic about this ever since then. Judge Kavanaugh on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals wrote an opinion in dissent. The court didn't go along with him. Would have struck down a D.C. Circuit ban on semi-automatic rifles and magazines with over 10 guns, and he said that that this shouldn't be based on any kind of a balancing test, that this is in the Bill of Rights, and we ought to examine the text, history, and tradition of the Constitution and uphold those rights and strike down those regulations. And I expect the Democrats are going to make a lot of hay about it, which is why they invited specifically to the hearings a father of one of the victims of the horrific Parkland shooting.
Well, and that was an incredibly embarrassing event. I actually had a dialogue with this gentleman last night, one of the fathers of one of the Parkland shooting victims, who made his feelings about Judge Kavanaugh's appointment known beforehand, that he was going to do everything he could to ensure that the judge did not get appointed, rushed up to him in the middle of a break and was ushered away. The justice was ushered away by the Capitol Police, but they took a photo of the second his hand was outreached to the justice, and the justice was looking at him, didn't know who he was. And they posted that Justice Kavanaugh refused to shake hands with the father of a Parkland victim, which I guess what I would ask you, John, the media is every bit as complicit in this craziness as anybody. And last night we heard about, I'm not sure how much you caught of this, but a young lady who works in one of the staffers from the White House was apparently making a white supremacist sign behind Justice Kavanaugh to like in secret. Come to find out, the young lady was a Latin American graduate of the Wharton Business School whose both parents had survived the Holocaust. And the left ran with that story for a good 30 minutes.
Yeah, now there are some horrifically irresponsible members of the media, not all, but some. I mean, so here is this guy. I mean, Brett Kavanaugh has to sit there all day watching all of this. There is a break. He is surrounded by well-wishers whom he knows. He needs to take a break because he's been sitting there this whole time. His wife and kids, by the way, have already been shuffled out of the room because there have been rumors that some of the people in attendance might get violent. And so this guy walks up to Brett Kavanaugh, whom he doesn't know at all, and sticks out his hand, and Brett Kavanaugh is distracted. And to try to say that this was a snub of the father of a shooting victim is astonishing. I would bet my bottom dollar that if Brett Kavanaugh actually knew who this person was, he would have stopped everybody and sat and talked to that man and offered his condolences. And to try to make something of this is really opprobrious.
Well, I was going to say that the whole white supremacist thing around the young lady was first tweeted by a senior White House member of the press corps, a blue-checked. It's humiliating and embarrassing. And I got to tell you that we played sound bites earlier. I really do believe that if you listen to the left in the news last night, they were talking about, they're trying to energize their base, and that. I think they're doing the exact opposite. I think they're motivating people like me and people that are on the fence and in the middle and on the right. They're just giving us more incentive to make sure we pull a lever in the next election because it's that important.
Well, that's the gamble that they're going to take. I also want to, by the way, harken back to something you played before about Cory Booker and President Trump somehow under investigation, and this casts a cloud on things. I'll say a couple of things about that. One is that nobody said a word about this when Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer were nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court, even though we were in the midst of the Whitewater investigation, in which Bill Clinton was clearly a subject, if not a target, of that investigation. And what's more, I am very confident that Brett Kavanaugh and any of the other potential nominees to this position on the Supreme Court, if they had been sitting in the Oval Office with President Trump, and President Trump had said, I want you to guarantee me that you're going to rule favorably for me, not to mention any of my agencies, but in favor of me personally in any case that might come up, any one of those nominees, including Brett Kavanaugh, would have said, "Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm leaving now, and I am no longer interested in being considered to be on the Supreme Court." Back when Nixon was litigating the Nixon tapes case in front of the Supreme Court, he lost unanimously in an opinion written by Warren Burger, whom Nixon had appointed, and that was joined by 3 other justices whom Nixon had appointed. And similarly, when Bill Clinton, when the Paula Jones case came up before the Supreme Court unanimously held that the Paula Jones case could proceed, and that ruling was joined by Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer, whom Clinton had appointed. These judges are bright, have a reputation that is well earned, and are eminently capable of exercising independence from the person who appointed them.
I have a question. Do you think that the judge thought going in there, one, it wouldn't be the show that it was yesterday, or do you think that he brought his family in trying to keep it a little respectable?
I think neither of those. I actually think that he probably predicted that it would be something this contentious. The Democrats had obviously talked before the hearings began about how to disrupt the hearings. I think that it's just tradition that you introduce the family, and this is a proud moment for him. And you would think that his family would be welcome and to have this be a memorable experience. But to have it, I'm hoping at the end it won't be tainted, their memories of this by all of this stuff. But to have his young daughter subjected to this tirade was reprehensible in my view.
Absolutely. And I think that when, he goes through this, do you think that they go home at night and go, is it really worth it?
I think he's probably asked himself that quite a bit. But I got to tell you, the bigger piece to me is this is the biggest day of this man's life, the biggest event of this man's life. And he's worked his whole life to get to this point. And there was no shortage of people out to just absolutely destroy this man's, health and well-being.
Well, you know what I compare it to is going to the stadium with our kids and being in an opposing stadium. It should not feel like a baseball game in the World Series. Yeah. In our court.
Yeah. Well, this is the World Series of politics. I don't think there's any question about that. But look, Brett Kavanaugh is a tough guy. I mean, when he was confirmed to the D.C. Circuit, he was actually nominated in 2003. He wasn't confirmed until 2006. He went through 2 confirmation hearings, and this is a guy who stood by, George Bush's side for several years as a staff assistant during what were no doubt some very tense decisions and some very tense times. So he is personally tough, and I am quite sure that he has told his family, look, sometimes this is the price for doing what's right, but it's worth it because it's important public service to the country. And if nothing else, Brett Kavanaugh has been a dedicated public servant his entire professional career.
Seen what the left will do with those people, much like General Flynn. The left is in full-on character assassination mode, and they're not letting up. And today's is going to be more of the same. The more I got to tell you, one last thing, the more they let him talk, the less they're going to be able to speak. The left, that's just going to very clearly make them look like the idiots they're acting like, because this man, as you said, is supremely qualified, and all of the things you could want in a justice this man possesses. John, listen, this was a pleasure. I would love to have you back because I think there's going to be a lot of stuff moving forward. Actually, I would love to have you back when he gets to appoint the next Supreme Court justice.
I'd love to
that
join
was going to be a complete crap. So, John, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
I said that it's the epitome of hypocrisy. Unless you fall in line with their liberal agenda, this uniparty, globalist, liberal agenda, they will never support you. They use the whole gender issue, of course, as some kind of tool to prop up their messaging, but it's the phoniest thing.
Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is one of the guys that I get the pleasure to speak to each week. Never enough time. Breitbart's own Jerome Hudson. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing great. How are you?
I'm perplexed because I spent some of yesterday with time I'll never get back watching this Senate confirmation hearing, which has turned into a complete shit show, and everybody on it from the left has gone off their rocker. I never thought I'd see this. Well, I guess I should say that's not true. I shouldn't say never, because these people are doing exactly what I thought they were doing. There's so many things that are embarrassing to me. I'll start by asking you, first of all, what stood out from the first day? What was the biggest message you took away from that first day?
That you had senior Senate Democratic officials had apparently had meetings, hotly contested debates about how they would strategize and essentially just blow up and deliberately cause chaos on the first day of the hearings. And what has essentially come out today is that you have certain elements on the left who are calling out Chuck Schumer, who was apparently one of the figureheads on trying to disrupt the hearing. Now you have leftist groups coming out saying that, well, you didn't do enough. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of arrests, points at which, you had Senate Republicans couldn't even get a word in edgewise. Judge Brett Kavanaugh's children had to be escorted out because the protesters were quite frankly frightening them. And now you have leftists saying that the Democrats weren't crazy enough. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing.
When you talk about hard left and then you get Ocasio-Cortez and go to a whole different degree of left, that's what yesterday felt like. It was irrational and irresponsible. I had a gentleman on earlier, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage. He's a legal expert, and he made a point that I had forgotten about. And we've talked about the left. One of the left's initial plans was to quelch this entire thing because President Trump is under investigation, which they've already told him he's not a target of the investigation, but blah, here or there. However, Justice Ginsburg and Justice Breyer, during their confirmation hearings, the Clintons were under investigation for Whitewater. They were targets of the Whitewater investigation. And that was never a concern or an issue. The ABA, which the left is a horribly left-leaning organization, the American Bar Association, has given Justice Kavanaugh their highest rating, which used to be the litmus test for Democrats. That and the body of work. His body of work is more than the last 5 justices combined, 307 rulings. He's participated in another 391. He's getting confirmed. There's just nothing they can do about this. So what is this? What are they doing? What is the grand? Is it really? Are they really rehashing their nastiness over losing the 2016 election and running for 2018 and 2020 positions?
I think you see this every now and again where you have a situation where either the president is completely right on the law or the execution of or whatever he's done. In this specific case, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, as you so eloquently alluded to, I don't think he could be more qualified for this position. I mean, and he is just a strict constitutionalist. I'm sure that the man in his heart, which I have no idea what is in it, but I'm sure he has his own, preferences and proclivities in terms of ideological issues, whatever they may be. But in his professional career as a judge, I mean, he's just ruled by the letter of the constitutional law. And so it's one of those times where you have a man who could not be offensive even if he tried to. They're just trying to muddy and bloody him up, and it just comes off as so vagrantly transparent what they're trying to do. I mean, there's not an offensive bone in the man's body. And I mean, you had the Parkland dad who pulled the stunt in front of him. You had one of the senior legal aides. I mean, they're talking about she's throwing up a white supremacist sign. She's the daughter of Jews. You know what I mean?
Right.
Who
and she's Latin American.
Escaped the Holocaust.
Right.
I hate this. I hate this so much because my beat is Hollywood, but I have to. I mean, I'm an editor at Breitbart, so I have to pay attention to this politics stuff. And it just makes my head just spin how stupid these people are and how stupid they think the American voter is.
Since you have that connection with Hollywood, maybe you could help these Democrats to make it a little bit more interesting when they're on the floor. Instead of just screaming, they could get some acting lessons and make it a little bit more fun to watch. I mean, I just don't think that they're going to sway anybody except the hardcore Democrats.
Well, they're not trying to sway anybody. That's just it. They're not.
No, but
they're trying to energize their base.
Yeah, they're trying to make their base feel that they're doing the best that they can. But we think about schooling, and we think about lawyers and doctors, how much time they go to school, and if Kavanaugh was a doctor, he would be the doctor that we would all go to.
Yeah.
And yet, they're somehow like trying to say that he's not as qualified in this position. But if they had to put their life on it, that's who they would want to be. And so I just don't see.
I mean, I don't think I've heard anybody really, honestly, and you heard Senator Cruz during the sound bites. No one can question his qualifications. Every time this man gets to speak in front of these people, they look as stupid as they're acting.
Right.
I would give anything, though, to be at home with him when he comes home and he briefs with his wife.
Yeah, there's a dog might be getting punted.
No, I'm going to say.
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, look, Hillary Clinton, I mean, what were her qualifications? That she just happened to marry the right guy who just happened to be elected president, and her
she had a
political, well, her political career was then catapulted. She was two-term senator from the most liberal state in the union, although California would probably contest that. And she was Secretary of State because the country just wanted the new, hot, young, fresh black guy over the woman. And then when she ran again, as you pointed out, she had a vagina. I mean, that is the logic of the left for you. It's all abstract.
Well, it was her time, remember? Remember, the left said she has to be president because it's her time. It's a time for a woman president, not the most qualified candidate, just like it's time for a black president.
That is how 150-plus million voters decided it. And obviously there were millions of people who voted for her just because they wanted to be with her, quote unquote. Right. But the majority of the country said no. I mean, I'm facing real issues, and I just don't actually trust this woman. I don't agree with her politics, and it has nothing to do with the fact that she is a woman. But that's the way that the left thinks. There are obviously elements to this. I am firmly in the belief that there are many people in the media who are personally pissed that Donald Trump won because they thought that they would be able to catapult their media careers into White House jobs in the Clinton administration, and that didn't happen. But again, I mean, there are paid protesters. They're just people who are whacked out ideologues living in a warped reality, and they believe that Judge Brett Kavanaugh, if he is nominated and he becomes a Supreme Court senator, they honestly believe that this country will turn into The Handmaid's Tale, where women are stripped of all of their civil rights and forced to have babies for some Christian theocratic government. That is the crazy mix and orgy of lunacy that happens here.
That's the Hollywood aspect of it for sure.
I've seen pictures of the people who are being tossed out of the Supreme Court hearings. And first of all, how do they get in? I mean, are there people waiting in line?
No, there's a public section.
Right.
And they're lined up around the block to get into this one.
Right. But I look at it as if I'm going to something like this, and maybe this is just my conservative view or my age view. I'm dressed appropriately.
Well, no, you were raised with Kuth.
Right, to go in there,
and
you can spot them out, just like you can spot the Antifa out.
Well, they're people without jobs. These are the people that stand on I-95 at 10 a.m. trying to block the freeway to protest something stupid because they're getting welfare checks and they don't have to go to work. That's how this works.
I don't know, but we've told our kids that if we ever see them in something like that, school's done. Yeah. You're coming home and you're getting a job.
I wouldn't pay for $1 at college if my kids were acting like idiots.
Nope.
So.
And now they're at college. And what is Gabby's in a urban studies of schools right now, our daughter. And what was the one that Garrick's?
Well, yeah. You know what? I got to tell you, Jerome, I had some hope. Both of my kids. My oldest son's had his first poli-sci class yesterday, and both teachers are admitted liberals, but both of them challenged all of the kids in the class to think and debate and deny and refuse when they disagree with him. Now, I don't know if that's setting him up to give them all Fs, or if that's actually something he's looking for. They want debate because they want these kids involved in elections.
Well, that's what my son's teacher said right away. You need to vote today. I don't care what else you do. You need to vote. So, I mean, there is hope that we keep hearing about the bad teachers, but I'm curious to see how the end of the semester comes and how they're open-minded.
We'll find out how open-minded they are.
See if they get little Christmas gifts or big Christmas gifts.
Hey, Jerome, I'm curious. Did you see I saw something that inspired me yesterday. There was a picture on Twitter of someone's plane ticket. They had flown back here to vote yesterday. And I thought that was so badass. They flew back here to vote and then flew back to their job. And I thought, first of all, that's a really wealthy dude. But secondly,
does he know about writing in?
That's pretty badass, though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I believe there was a special election last night where yet again a young Democratic Socialist.
How about that?
Won.
In mass. In mass, the fourth tenured Democratic congressman was beaten, which, again, like the hearings yesterday, Jerome, that this fills me with hope because the country, that they represent everything that is not even remotely related to the Constitution and American values.
I think I made this point the last time that we were on, but at the point where, at a time where you have Venezuela, which was the most wealthy countries in South America, has just been completely wrecked and destroyed, not overnight, but certainly because of a command and control socialist government and years of horrible rule. You have young people, and some 30 and 40-year-old people who are drinking whole this crazy, ridiculous logic that we need more government interference in our free market economy, and somehow that will lead to more jobs and more economic prosperity for everyone. This pie in the sky BS from Bernie Sanders on high, a guy who did not actually have a paycheck until he was 40, and then when he did receive that paycheck, it was on the government dole.
His foreign policy is shaped around his 2 vacations to Russia. He's been to Russia, and he understands that being in Russia as a tourist is great. So he's never been to Russia as a peasant, but he's been to Russia as a tourist, and it's awesome there. First of all, if you go back and look at Venezuela and Cuba in the 1960s, they were thriving countries. And you look at the photos; they look like the Vegas Strip. Go back and look at them today, and that's what socialism will do to your economy, number one. I want to ask you this. I got a lot of questions about this yesterday. Please give me your impressions of Nike and Colin Kaepernick and their new campaign.
It's probably one of the most cynical things I've ever seen. And that's saying a lot for a humongous multinational corporation. They do cynical shit all the time. But the one thing, and I woke up at 3:45 a.m. here on the East Coast this morning, and I just started reading all the fallout. I kind of gave it a day, so all the smart people, so-called smart people, could say whatever they wanted to say. And I have yet to see anyone. I mean, all the noise around Colin Kaepernick's new Nike ad, everyone is ignoring the fact that the rationale for Colin Kaepernick's anthem protest was based on a pernicious lie.
Yes.
That, quote, police officers continue to terrorize black and brown communities, end quote. It was bullshit. It was a lie.
Yes.
And I understand that lives were lost. Like, mistakes were made by officers, put in horrific situations that years of training still didn't prepare them for, right? But it was a lie. Law enforcement officers around this country were not caballing together in some radical, murderous conspiracy theory to just shoot black and brown people. But that is the bullshit rationale that Colin Kaepernick ran out with. And this is before he wore the Fidel Castro shirt to official 49ers activities in Miami, or the black socks with cops depicted as pigs on them, right? Every time he spoke, and he doesn't really speak. If you notice, he uses his Twitter feed. He follows about 100 or so people and he retweets, but every statement he makes is carefully crafted. Why? Because I don't think that what's sitting on his shoulders is very powerful at all. I mean, the guy believes that he is a victim, and he's being held up as a martyr. He didn't sacrifice. I mean, an article I read in the Daily Beast compared him to Muhammad Ali. Agree with Muhammad Ali or disagree with Muhammad Ali, that dude was a champion when he objected to the Vietnam War, which many people actually have varied opinions about that war. Colin Kaepernick took a team that would have probably gone to the Super Bowl because it was stacked in 2012 to a Super Bowl game, and he didn't win. And in the waning years, the remaining years of his NFL career, his statistics were on a precipitous decline. He didn't give a shit about black people getting shot when he was living in San Francisco, which has a disproportionate amount of homeless black people in that city. He didn't care about all the black people robbing, shooting, and maiming other black people 12 miles away from San Francisco over the bridge in Oakland. He didn't stand up, and he still hasn't spoken out as vociferously about the thing that actually terrorizes black and brown communities, black killers and gang members, spreading drugs around and controlling neighborhoods so horrifically to the point where in some parts of Chicago and Philly, you can't even send your kids out of the house to walk to the bus stop because as a parent, you're in fear that they come home. I mean, it's absolutely infuriating that this guy is being held up as a martyr. And again, the reason that he is now famous, some sort of folk hero, is based on a lie.
God bless you, because I was on TV twice yesterday, and I started the conversation with that point. I said, can we just not skip the fact that everything that Colin Kaepernick is and has become was started for and founded on a complete lie. Hands Up, Don't Shoot was proven to be a lie. And the Black Lives Matter movement was started on a lie. In the 75 most violent cities in the United States, blacks make up 13% of the population and commit 64% of the violent crimes. There is no disproportionate level of violence from police officers to young black men. Is there racism on the police force? Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. There's racism in many walks of life, but the fact of the matter is that we've marginalized them. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but those people don't move and shake us anymore.
That's not the America that Colin Kaepernick grew up in.
Nope.
This is the America that elected a black man with an African name twice. He got a larger share of the white vote the second time around. That is the America that Colin Kaepernick grew up in. I don't want to hear this shit about Muhammad Ali, who
or
there
Jackie
was no
Robinson.
Actual Voting Rights Act when Muhammad Ali was winning rights. He couldn't even sleep in certain hotels because of the horrid racism in this country. You had segregationists running for president. You had Lyndon Baines Johnson, a virulent racist, win the presidency.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who are going to buy these $100+ shoes are as woke as they can be, and they're so damn stupid, dumb, and sleep that it just boggles the mind. It boggles the mind. And Nike is supposedly this woke company. I mean, they're constantly embroiled in sweatshop scandals, one after the other.
Right.
And God bless these kids in Vietnam because they probably wouldn't have an income if they weren't stitching together shoes that were going to be hiked up 100 times over. Of course, they'd never see the money, but I mean, this stuff is ridiculous, man.
Well, this is Tiger Woods and Colin Kaepernick. They can't seem to catch a break, huh? I mean, my goodness. But they're trying to. I'm way over my time, but God bless you, man. I always enjoy catching up with you. Never get enough time.
God bless you too. I enjoy it.
All right, pal. Final thoughts today. I'm going to try and get through a letter and read a letter that got almost no coverage except on Breitbart yesterday. This was a letter written by a woman who has watched and knows what sacrifice means. On the heels of the Colin Kaepernick campaign, Nike, I love your gear, but you exhaust my spirit on this one. Your new ad with Colin Kaepernick, I get the message, but that sacrificing everything thing, it just doesn't play out here. Sacrificing what exactly? A career? I've done that both times. I chose to stay home and be with my kids instead of continuing my business climb, and it wasn't sacrificing everything. It was sacrificing one career and some money, and it was because of what I believe in and, more importantly, who I believe in. At best, that's all Collins sacrificed. Some money, and it's debatable if he really lost his career over it. Maybe he sacrificed the respect of some people while he gained the respect of others. Or maybe he used one career to springboard himself into a different career when the first was waning. I don't know. What I do know is he gained popularity in magazine covers he likely wouldn't have gotten without going on to his knees, or as you say, believing in something. I'm also thinking the irony is that while I'm not privy to the numbers, it's likely he gained a lucrative Nike contract. So yeah, that whole sacrificing everything is insulting to those who really have sacrificed everything. You want to talk about someone in the NFL sacrificing everything? Pat Tillman, NFL starting, not benched, player who left to join the Army and died for it. That is sacrificing everything for something you believe in. How about other warriors? Warriors who will not be on magazine covers, who will not get lucrative contracts, and millions of followers from their actions who have truly sacrificed everything. They did it because they believed in something. Take it from me when I say they sacrificed everything. They also sacrificed the lives of their loved ones who will never be the same. That is sacrificing everything for something they believe in. Did you get us talking? Yes, you did, but your brand recognition was strong enough. Did you teach the next generation of consumers about true grit? Not that I can see. Taking a stand, or rather a knee, against the flag which has covered the caskets of so many who actually did sacrifice everything for something they believe in, that we all believe in. Well, the irony of your ad, it almost leaves me speechless. Were you trying to be insulting? Maybe you were banking on the fact that we won't take the time to see your lack of judgment in using words that just don't fit. Maybe you are also banking on us not seeing Nike as kneeling before the flag. Or maybe you want us to see you exactly that way. I don't know. All I know is I was actually in the market for some new kicks, and at least for now, I've never been more grateful for Under Armour. That was Tara Kyle, wife of American Sniper, Chief Petty Officer, and U.S. Navy SEAL Christopher Kyle, who died February 2nd, 2013, and who was the subject of the movie American Sniper, a woman and a family who has sacrificed everything. God bless you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being here today. And we will catch you guys tomorrow morning.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I want to actually take a couple of the references to Donald Trump from hip-hop. And then we're going to try to see if we can figure out why they like Donald Trump. Jay-Z said, I'm at the Trump International. Ask for me. Raekwon said, I'm the Black Trump. They are comparing themselves to what he represents. His wealth, his achievement. Capitalism.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.